Divine Principle, Part 2, the Principle of Restoration, Chapter 6, the Second Advent, and Sections 3, 4, and 5. Where will Christ return? If Christ comes again as a man born on the earth, he'll certainly be born among a people who are chosen by God in accordance with his predestination. Where is the place God has chosen for Christ to return? Who are the people chosen to receive him? Will Christ return among the Jewish people? Some Christians expect that Christ will come again among the Jewish people, based on several passages from the Bible. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000 sealed, out of every tribe of the sons of Israel. And truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. However, to interpret these verses in this way is to misunderstand God's providence. On this manner Jesus uttered the parable of the vineyard. Hear another parable. There was a householder who planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, and dug a winepress in it, and built a tower, and let it out to tenants, and then went into another country. When the season of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the tenants to get his fruit. And the tenants took his servants and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did the same to them. Afterward he sent his son to them, saying, They'll respect my son. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, Hey, this is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and have his inheritance. And they took him and cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. When therefore the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? They said to him, He'll put those wretches to a miserable death, and let out the vineyard to other tenants, who'll give him the fruits in their seasons. And Jesus said to them, Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you, and given to a nation producing the fruits of it. In this parable, the householder represents God. The vineyard represents God's work. The tenants entrusted with the work represent the Jewish people. The servants represent the prophets, and the son of the householder represents Jesus. And the other tenants who harvest the fruits represent some other nation which can receive Christ at the second advent and realize God's will. By this parable, Jesus conveyed that he'll not come again to the people who persecuted him. God will take away the mission previously entrusted to them and give it to another people who can produce its fruits upon Christ's return. Why then does the Bible seem to portray Christ as returning to Israel? To answer this question, we must first inquire as to the meaning of Israel. Israel means the one who has prevailed. Jacob received this name upon defeating the angel who wrestled with him at the ford of Jabbok. Jacob wrestled with the angel to secure the position of Abel for the foundation of substance. By successfully securing the position of Abel and making the substantial offering, Jacob established the family foundation for the Messiah. His descendants, who inherited the responsibility for God's providence upon this foundation, are called Israel, or the chosen people. The term Israel thus signifies the people of God who have triumphed through their faith, and does not necessarily apply to everyone who comes out of Jacob's lineage. Thus John the Baptist said to the Jews, Do not presume to say to yourselves that we have Abraham as our father. For I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children to Abraham. Moreover, St. Paul said, For he is not a real Jew who is one outwardly, nor is true circumcision something external and physical. He is a Jew who is one inwardly, and real circumcision is a matter of the heart, spiritual, and not literal. And not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel. They reproached those Jews who boasted that they were the chosen people, based only on their lineal connection to Abraham, even though they were not, in fact, living in accordance with the will of God. It can be said that the descendants of Jacob were Israel at the time of their departure from Egypt under Moses' leadership, but they no longer were when they turned against God in the wilderness. Therefore, God swept them away in the wilderness and led only the younger generation into Canaan. These God regarded as the true Israel. Of the descendants of Abraham who entered the land of Canaan, the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel who transgressed against God perished because they lost their qualification as God's chosen people. Only the 2 tribes of the southern kingdom of Judah, who continued to uphold the will of God, remained the chosen people who could eventually receive Jesus. Nevertheless, when they led Jesus to the cross, they also lost their qualification to be the people centrally responsible for God's providence. Who became the chosen people after Jesus' crucifixion? They were none other than the Christians, who inherited the faith of Abraham and took on the mission which Abraham's descendants did not complete. St. Paul wrote, "Through their trespass salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous," testifying that the center of God's providence of restoration had shifted from the Jews to the Gentiles. Therefore, the chosen people who should lay the foundation for Christ at the second advent are not the descendants of Abraham, but rather the Christians, who have inherited the faith of Abraham. Christ will return to a nation in the east. As Jesus explained through the parable of the vineyard, when the Jewish people, like the tenants in the parable who killed the son of their master, led Jesus to the cross, they lost their providential mission. Which nation then will inherit the work of God and bear its fruits? The Bible suggests that this nation is in the east. The book of Revelation describes the opening of a scroll, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll, written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look into it, and I wept much that no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. Then one of the elders said to me, "Weep not, for lo, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." The Lion of the tribe of Judah signifies Christ. It's he who will open the 7 seals in the last days. After 6 of the seals are opened, then I saw another angel ascend from the rising of the sun, with a seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice, saying, "Do not harm the earth, or the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God upon their foreheads." And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000. This indicates that the seal of the living God will be placed on the foreheads of the 144,000 in the east, where the sun rises. These chosen ones will accompany the Lamb at his return. We can thus infer that the nation which will inherit the work of God and bear its fruit for the sake of the second advent is in the east. There Christ will be born and received by the 144,000 elect of God. Which among the nations of the east is chosen to receive the Lord? The nation in the east is Korea. Since ancient times, the nations in the east have traditionally been considered to be the 3 nations of Korea, Japan, and China. Among them, Japan throughout its history has worshipped the sun goddess, Amaterasu Omikami. Japan entered the period of the Second Advent as a fascist nation and severely persecuted Korean Christianity. China at the time of the Second Advent was a hotbed of communism and would become a communist nation. Thus both nations belong to Satan's side. Korea then is the nation in the east where Christ will return. Let's examine from the viewpoint of the principle of various ways in which Korea has become qualified to receive Christ at the Second Advent. As the nation to which the Messiah returns, Korea had to meet the following qualifications. A national condition of indemnity. For Korea to become a nation fit to receive the Messiah, it had to fulfill a national dispensation of 40 for the separation of Satan for the cosmic level restoration of Canaan. Why was Korea given this condition of indemnity? If Christ returns to Korea, the Korean people are destined to become the third Israel. In the Old Testament age, the descendants of Abraham who upheld God's will and endured the persecution in Egypt were the first Israel. The Christians, who were persecuted as heretics by the Jews as they honored the resurrected Jesus and carried on the providence of restoration, became the second Israel. Christ at his return is likely to be similarly condemned as a heretic by the Christians of his time, in accordance with the prophecy that he will suffer and be rejected by his generation, as was Noah in his days. If so, God will have to abandon the Christians who are persecuting Christ, just as he abandoned the Jews who rejected Jesus. Then the Korean people, who will attend the returning Christ and support him to complete the 3rd chapter of God's providence, will become the third Israel. The first Israel suffered 400 years in Egypt. This was to fulfill the dispensation of 40 for the separation of Satan, as required to fulfill a dispensation to set out on the national course to restore Canaan. The second Israel had to prevail over the 400 years of persecution in the Roman Empire to fulfill the dispensation of 40 for the separation of Satan as required to commence the worldwide course for the restoration of Canaan. As the third Israel, the Korean people had to also suffer under a nation on Satan's side for a period which fulfills the number 40. Thereby they could fulfill a dispensation of 40 for the separation of Satan as required to commence the cosmic level course to restore Canaan. This was the 40-year period during which Korea suffered untold hardships as a colony of Japan. Korea was an early objective of Japan's imperialist policy. The Ulsa Treaty of Protection, concluded in 1905 by Hirohumi Ito of Japan and Wongyong Lee of Korea, imposed on Korea the status of a Japanese protectorate. All of Korea's diplomatic rights were given over to the care of the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Japan. Japan stationed a governor-general and appointed military officials in every district to control all of Korea's domestic affairs. In a short time, Japan had forced its will upon the Korean people, dictating their politics, diplomacy, and economic affairs. Japan forcibly annexed Korea in 1910. The Japanese committed atrocities against the Korean people, imprisoning and executing many patriots, and depriving the people of their freedom. When a movement for independence broke out on March 1, 1919, the Japanese killed thousands of civilians in every part of this peninsula. At the time of the Great Kanto earthquake in 1923, the Japanese made scapegoats of innocent Koreans living in Tokyo and massacred many of them. Meanwhile, many Koreans who could no longer endure Japanese oppression gave up their homes and fled to the wilderness of Manchuria in pursuit of freedom. There they endured untold hardships and gave their hearts and souls for the independence of their homeland. The Japanese military searched from village to village for these loyal Koreans. In some villages they herded young and old alike into a building and set it on fire, burning them alive. Japan continued such tyranny right up to the day of its fall. The Koreans who were killed in the March 1st independence movement and in the wilderness of Manchuria were predominantly Christians. Toward the end of its colonial rule, Japan embarked on a notorious policy to stamp out independent Christianity in Korea. Christians were forced to worship at Shinto shrines. Those who did not comply were imprisoned or executed. When Emperor Hirohito of Japan surrendered at the end of World War II, the Korean people were finally liberated from their bondage. The Korean people suffered for 40 years, from the Ulsa Treaty of Protection of 1905 to their liberation in 1945. Their suffering paralleled the hardships of the first Israel in Egypt and the second Israel in the Roman Empire. Korea's independence movement was led mainly by Christians, both at home and abroad. It was the Christians who suffered the most under Japan's tyranny. God's front line and Satan's front line. In the last days, the world is divided into the democratic world and the communist world. Because he had given Adam the blessing of dominion, God had to give Satan a free rein to create, through Adam's descendants, an unprincipled world. God has had to follow in pursuit, working to restore the unprincipled world to his side. When Christ returns to restore this fallen world to its original state as created by God, he'll surely work to save the communist world. No doubt the nation to which he returns will play the central role in this dispensation. Korea, the nation where Christ will return, is the place most dear to God and most abhorred by Satan. It's the front line for both God and Satan, a place where the forces of democracy and the forces of communism collide. This line of confrontation is Korea's 38th parallel, which was drawn to fulfill the providence of God. At the point of confrontation between God and Satan, a sacrifice must be offered as a condition to determine the outcome of the struggle. The Korean people were this sacrifice, placed on this front line of battle to be offered for the sake of the restoration of the universe. The Korean people, therefore, God divided the Korean nation just as Abraham's sacrifices were supposed to be divided. This is the reason behind the division of Korea by the 38th parallel, which split it into two nations, one Cain type and the other Abel type. The 38th parallel is the front line of battle between democracy and communism. At the same time, it's the front line of battle between God and Satan. The Korean War, which raged across the 38th parallel, was not merely a civil war. Moreover, it was a conflict between the democratic world and the communist world. Moreover, it was a conflict between God and Satan. Because this war had worldwide significance for the accomplishment of the providence of restoration, the armed forces of the member states of the United Nations were mobilized for the first time. Even though the participating nations may not have understood this providential significance, they were acting in line with God's will for the liberation of the spiritual fatherland. At the fall of the first human ancestors, God's side and Satan's side parted ways from a single point. Life and death, good and evil, love and hate, happiness and sorrow, fortune and misfortune, all have divided from a single point and come into continual conflict with each other in human history. These divided realities consolidated separately into the Cain-type and Abel-type worlds, which eventually matured to form the democratic world and the communist world. When these two worlds came into global conflict, it was centered on the Korean Peninsula. Religions, ideologies, political forces, and economic systems all came into conflict and caused great confusion in Korean society, which then had worldwide impact. This is because the phenomena which took place in the spirit world unfolded as a physical reality in Korea, the central providential nation, and were magnified worldwide. This outbreak of social and ideological chaos was a clear sign that a new world order was fast approaching. As Jesus once said, "As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near." When the disciples asked Jesus of the place of his return, he said, "Where the body is, there the eagles will be gathered." Eternal life and eternal death collide in Korea, the front line of the battle between God and Satan. Devils, symbolized by the eagles, gather in this land in search of the spiritually dead, while the returning Lord comes to this land in search of the people of abundant life. The object partner of God's heart. To become the object partners of God's heart, we must first walk a path of blood, sweat, and tears. Ever since human beings fell under the dominion of Satan and had come to oppose God, God has been grieving with the heart of a parent who lost his children. God has labored continually in the sinful world to save immoral and wretched human beings who are nonetheless his children. Moreover, in his efforts to recover his rebellious children, time and again, God has had to let the most righteous and beloved ones he sacrificed. Moreover, in his efforts to recover his rebellious children, time and again, God has had to let the most righteous and beloved ones be sacrificed to the satanic world, even delivering Jesus, his only begotten Son, to the cross. God has been grieving in this way every day since the human fall. Accordingly, an individual, family, or nation who is fighting the satanic world for the sake of God's will cannot avoid the path of blood, sweat, and tears. How can we, as loyal, faithful children, be comfortable and complacent and still expect to remain the object partners of our Heavenly Father, who is suffering in deep agony? The nation which can receive the Messiah should become the object partner of God's heart by demonstrating filial piety. That's why it must walk a path of blood, sweat, and tears. Both the first Israel and the second Israel walked a path of suffering. The Korean people, the third Israel, have done likewise. Their miserable history was the path required of the chosen people of God. One can never be certain what great blessings such a path of affliction may eventually bring. The nation qualified to stand as the object partner of God's heart must be a people of goodness. The Korean people, a homogeneous race with a 4,000-year history, rarely invaded other nations. Even during the Goguryeo and Silla periods, when they boasted impressive military might, they used their forces only to thwart invaders. Considering that a fundamental nature of Satan is to aggressively encroach upon others, it's clear that the Korean people are qualified to stand on God's side. God's strategy is to claim victory after his side has been attacked first. Although the countless prophets and saints have been sacrificed in the course of history, and even Jesus died on the cross, time and again God claimed victory in the end. Although Satan's side was the aggressor in the First and Second World Wars, in the end, victory was won by the nations on God's side. Similarly, the Korean people have been invaded numerous times by foreign powers. God's true intention in having them endure these tribulations was to have them stand on his side and secure the final victory. The Korean people are by nature endowed with a religious character. Their religious inclination has led them to strive always for that which transcends physical reality and is of a more profound value. From ancient times, when their culture was still primitive, the Korean people have shown a strong desire to worship God. They didn't have a high regard for religions which superstitiously deified nature, or strove for happiness in temporal life. They have always revered the virtues of loyalty, filial piety, and chastity. Their fondness for folk tales which express these virtues, such as the tale of Shimjong and the tale of Chungyang, stems from this powerful underpinning of their culture. The Korean people have long cherished a messianic hope, nurtured by the clear testimonies of their prophets. The first Israel believed in the testimonies of its prophets, that the Messiah would come as their king, establish the kingdom, and bring them salvation. The second Israel was able to endure an arduous path of faith, due in part to their hope in the return of Christ. Similarly, the Korean people, the third Israel, have believed in the prophecy that the righteous king will appear and found a glorious and everlasting kingdom in their land. Clinging to this hope, they found the strength to endure their afflictions. This messianic idea among the Korean people was revealed through the Cheongmanok, a book of prophecy written in the 14th century of the beginning of the Yi dynasty. Because this prophecy foretold that a new king would emerge, the ruling class tried to suppress it. The Japanese colonial regime tried to stamp out this notion by burning the book and oppressing its believers. After Christianity became widely accepted, the idea was ridiculed as superstition. Nevertheless, this messianic hope still lives on, deeply ingrained in the soul of the Korean people. The hope for a righteous king, foretold in the Cheongmanok, was the appellation Chongdo-ryong, the one who comes with the true word of God. In fact, this is a Korean prophecy of the Christ, who is to return to Korea. Even before the introduction of Christianity to Korea, God had revealed through the Cheongmanok that the Messiah would come to that land. Today, scholars affirm that many passages of this book of prophecy coincide with the prophecies in the Bible. Furthermore, among the faithful of every religion in Korea are those who have received revelations that the founders of their religions will return to Korea. We learn through our study of the progress of cultural spheres that all religions are converging toward one religion. God's desires for Christianity of the last days to become this final religion, which can assume the responsibility of completing the goals of the many religions in history. The returning Christ, who comes as a center of Christianity, will attain the purposes for which the founders of religion strove to accomplish. Therefore, with respect to his mission, Christ at his return may be regarded as the second coming of the founder of every religion. When the second comings of the founders of the various religions appear in Korea in fulfillment of the diverse revelations, they'll not come as different individuals. One person, Christ at the second advent, will come as the fulfillment of all these revelations. The Lord whose coming has been revealed to believers in various religions, including the Maitreya Buddha in Buddhism, the true man in Confucianism, the returning Chosun, who founded the religion of Chongdo-gyo, and the coming of the Chongdo-ryong in the Cheongmanok will be none other than Christ at the second advent. Finally, we witness revelations and signs being given to spiritually attuned Christians testifying to the coming of Christ in Korea. God's promise that he will pour out his Spirit upon all flesh is being fulfilled among Korean people, as devout Christians make contact with spirits from various levels of the spirit world, from the lower realms to paradise. Many are receiving clear revelations that the Lord will come to Korea. However, the current leadership of the Korean Christian churches is fast asleep. Spiritually ignorant, they go about their ministries oblivious to these signs of the times. This is similar to what happened in Jesus' time. The priests, rabbis, and scribes, who should have been the first to recognize the birth of the Messiah, remained entirely ignorant of it because they were spiritually blind. The astrologers and shepherds who received revelations were the ones who knew of Jesus' birth. Jesus said, "I thank thee, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that thou hast hidden these things from the wise and understanding, and revealed them to the babes." He was lamenting over the spiritual ignorance of the Jewish leadership of his time, while on the other hand, He was grateful that God bestowed grace upon pure and uneducated believers by revealing his providence to them. In today's Korean Christianity, at a time parallel to Jesus' day, similar phenomena are taking place, although in more complex ways. Through pure and innocent lay believers, God has been revealing many heavenly secrets concerning the last days. However, because they would be chastised as heretics if they were to proclaim them in public, they're keeping these truths to themselves. Meanwhile, like the priests, rabbis, and scribes of Jesus' time, many Christian clergy take pride in their knowledge of the Bible and their ability to interpret it. They take pleasure in the reverence they receive from their followers. They're content to carry on the imposing duties of their offices, yet to God's grief, they're entirely ignorant of God's providence in the last days. The culmination of all civilizations, spiritual and material civilization, built upon religion and science, the quest to overcome the two aspects of human ignorance, must be brought into harmony. Only then can we resolve the fundamental problems of human life and realize the world of God's ideal. In the world Christ comes to realize, science will be highly developed. It will be a society with the highest level of civilization, one in which all civilizations will have developed through the vertical course of providential history, will be restored horizontally under the leadership of the Lord. Therefore, the spiritual and material aspects of civilization, developing from religion and science, which has flourished all over the world, will be embraced and harmonized in Korea as guided by the new truth. Then they will bear fruit in the ideal world of God's deepest desire. First, the essences of all civilizations, which developed on the land, should bear fruit in Korea. The ancient continental civilizations, which arose in Egypt and Mesopotamia, bequeathed their fruits to the peninsular civilizations of Greece, Rome, and Iberia, and thence to the island civilizations of Great Britain. This island civilization passed on its culture to the United States, a continental civilization. Then the direction was reversed, with the United States passing on its culture to the island civilization of Japan. Now these fruits are to be harvested in the peninsular civilization of Korea, where Christ is to be born. Next, the essences of civilizations born on the shores of rivers and seas should bear fruit in the Pacific civilization to which Korea belongs. The river civilizations which arose on the shores of the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates rivers passed on their cultures to the civilizations in the vicinity of the Mediterranean Sea, Greece, Rome, Spain, Portugal. These bequeathed their fruits to the civilizations on the Atlantic Ocean, notably Great Britain and the United States. All these fruits will be harvested in the civilization of the Pacific Ocean, which links together the United States, Japan, and Korea. Last, civilizations born out of different climate zones should bear fruit in Korea. In the round of the seasons, living things begin their life and multiplication in spring, flourish in the summer, bear fruit in autumn, and store their reserves in the winter. The cycle of spring, summer, autumn, and winter is repeated not only year by year, but also day by day. Morning corresponds to spring, afternoon to summer, evening to autumn, and night to winter. The four phases of human life, childhood, youth, middle age, and old age, also fit this pattern. Human history, too, unfolds according to the seasons, because an aspect of God's principle underlying his creation is the harmonious seasonal circle of life. God created Adam and Eve in the springtime of human history. Accordingly, history was supposed to begin from the temperate zone civilization of Eden. Then, in its summer season, it should have moved to the tropical civilization. In autumn, to a cool zone civilization, and should have reached its culmination in a frigid zone civilization, analogous to the winter season. However, due to the fall, human beings were degraded to the levels of savages. Instead of building a temperate zone civilization, they prematurely came to live in the tropical zones as primitive men. On the continent of Africa, they built the tropic zone civilization of Egypt. This continental civilization passed on its culture to the peninsulas and islands where cool zone civilizations developed. They bequeathed their fruits to the frigid zone civilization of the Soviet Union. Now this current is to culminate in the formation of the temperate zone civilization of the New Eden. This should certainly take place in Korea, where all civilizations are to bear fruit. Section 4. Parallels between Jesus' day and today. The period of the Second Advent is parallel to the time of Jesus. The situations unfolding in Christianity today are similar to those which took place in Judaism at Jesus' time. Let's examine some of these parallels. Today's Christianity, like Judaism of Jesus' day, adheres too rigidly to institutional authority and ceremonies, while internally it's corrupt. At the time of Jesus, many priests and scribes had become enslaved to ritualism and legalism, and their spiritual life was corrupt. Therefore, Jews with sincere faith flocked to Jesus, that accused heretic, to slake their spiritual thirst. Similarly, at today's Christianity, many leading clergymen and priests are captive to their authorities and enamored of their rituals, while their spirits grow dimmer each day. Hence, devout Christians are wandering about the mountains and plains in search of the true path. They are seeking new leaders who can guide them out of the spiritual wilderness and show them the way to the inner light. Christian leaders today, like the Jewish leaders of Jesus' day, will probably be the first to persecute Christ at the Second Advent. Jesus came to found a new era, which would fulfill the words of the Old Testament proclaimed by the prophets. He didn't limit himself to repeating the words of the Old Testament, but gave new words of truth fit for the new era. The Jewish priests and scribes criticized Jesus' words and deeds based on their narrow understanding of the Old Testament Scriptures. Their mistaken judgment led them to deliver Jesus to the cross. Similarly, the purpose of Christ at the Second Advent is to build a new heaven and a new earth upon the foundation of the spiritual salvation which had been laid by Christianity in the New Testament age. When he returns, he'll not merely repeat the words of the New Testament given 2,000 years ago, but will surely add new words of truth necessary for the founding of a new heaven and new earth. However, those Christians of today, whose minds are narrowly attached to the letter of the New Testament, will criticize the words and deeds of Christ at his return based on the narrow understanding of the Scriptures. Therefore, it can be expected that they will brand the Lord a heretic and persecute him. This is why Jesus foretold that at the Second Advent, Christ would first suffer many things and be rejected by his generation. When people receive revelations about Christ at the Second Advent, or hear his words, they'll respond in ways similar to the way the Jews in Jesus' day responded. God did not reveal the news of the birth of Jesus to the priests and scribes, but to gentle astrologers and pure-hearted shepherds. This is like the case of a father who, due to the ignorance of his own children, has to confide in his stepchild. Likewise, God may well reveal the news of the return of Christ first to the lay people, to marginal spiritual groups and churches which the mainstream treats with disdain, or to conscientious non-believers. Only later may the news reach the mainstream Christian clergy, who are unthinkingly keeping to their conventional ways of faith. In Jesus' day, those who sincerely received the gospel were not the Jewish leaders, but simple common folk and Gentiles. Likewise, at Christ's return, simple Christians and non-Christians will accept the Lord's words before the Christian leadership, which regards itself as God's elect. This is the meaning of the Jesus parable of the marriage feast. When the invited guests, the leading men in the community, declined the king's invitation, he said to his servants, "The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the thoroughfares and invite the marriage feast as many as you can find." And those servants went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. Both in Jesus' day and at the Second Advent, many devout believers who set out on the path of faith with the hope of entering heaven may actually find themselves in hell. In Jesus' day, because the priests and scribes had the responsibility to guide God's chosen people, they should have been the first to recognize that the Messiah had come and should have led the Jewish people to him. To help them fulfill their mission, Jesus took the initiative. He visited the temple and taught them the gospel before teaching anyone else. However, when they didn't receive him, Jesus had no choice but to search the shores of Galilee and take disciples from among the fishermen there. He had to minister to the dregs of society and associate with sinners, tax collectors, and prostitutes. Eventually, the priests and scribes persecuted him to the point where he had to accept the fate of the cross. They committed this murder believing that they had done a righteous deed by eliminating a dangerous heretic and blasphemer. Then they continued on with their customary clerical duties for the rest of their lives, reciting the Holy Scriptures, paying their tithes, and making sacrifices at the temple, all with the assurance that they were headed toward heaven. Instead, after they passed on, they found themselves, most unexpectedly, in hell. Ironically, the very path upon which they had set out to reach heaven had led them astray. Recognizing that similar events may occur in the last days, each of us should seriously examine ourselves. Many Christians today are dashing on a path which they believe leads to heaven. Yet if they take a wrong step, their path may actually lead them to hell. This is why Jesus once said that he will rebuke many devout believers in the last days, even those whose dedication is so strong that they can cast out demons and perform miracles in his name. I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers. In truth, no one faces a more precarious situation than believers who live in such a transition period of history as exists today. No matter how much faith we've demonstrated in our lives, if we, like the Jewish leaders of Jesus' day, take the wrong step of turning against the returning Christ, all our efforts will have been in vain. Of these people, Daniel had said, "Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But those who are wise shall understand." Section 5. The chaotic profusion of languages and the necessity for their unification. If human beings had not fallen, we would have formed one global family, which may be likened to a body whose members are all interlinked with each other, with God as their head. Then all would have shared a common language. There never would have risen a profusion of tongues unintelligible to one another. The reason various languages arose and prevented free communication between peoples is that once their vertical relationship with God was severed at the fall, all horizontal relationships between people were also cut off. Humanity then splintered, dispersed into different geographical locations, and formed isolated communities. There is also a biblical account of giving spiritual insight into the confusion of languages. This is the story of the Tower of Babel. Noah's descendants had shared a common language. One day, the descendants of Noah's second son, Ham, who had sinned against God, built the Tower of Babel and exalted themselves even above God, thus furthering the will of Satan. When the descendants of Shem and Japheth, who stood on God's side, helped with the construction, God brought such confusion to their languages that they could no longer communicate with each other to further the will of Satan. As children of the same parents, having the same feelings of joy, anger, sorrow, and pleasure, if we cannot share our deepest feelings with one another because we speak different languages, it's the greatest of misfortunes. Our languages, therefore, must be unified if we're to realize the ideal world of one global family, which can honor Christ at the second advent as our true parent. As expressed in the account of the building of the Tower of Babel, chaos was brought to our languages when we exalted the will of Satan. The principle of restoration through indemnity requires that we participate in the construction of God's tower and glorify God's will as the way to unify all languages. Based upon which language will all languages be unified? The answer to this question is obvious. Children should learn the language of their parents. If Christ does indeed return to the land of Korea, then he'll certainly use the Korean language, which will then become the mother tongue for all humanity. Eventually, all people should speak true parents' language as their mother tongue. All of humanity will become one people, use one language, and thus establishing one global family nation under God.